Hey, this is Mikey Borup for PremiumBeat.com, and in this After Effects tutorial, I'm going to cover some character animation. Now, I know this is probably going to be a little bit of a longer tutorial, but I'm going to try to be as quick as I can, but still cover everything that you need to know to do some simple character animations. So let's get started. First off, with this tutorial, I'm going to include the project file so you can download it and see what I did exactly. And it's going to include this little character right here I like to call Baldy. And I've already got him into a Photoshop file with separate parts, the arms and the head and the legs and things like that. So to get started, I'm just going to take, here I have, see the Photoshop file. I'm going to just take that and drag it right into After Effects. And it's going to bring up this little dialog box, and it might be set on footage by default. Make sure you go down to composition, and I like to have the retain layer sizes. If you do just composition, then what that's going to do is the bounding box for all the arm and the head and the legs is going to be the size of the entire composition. If you do retain layer sizes, then the bounding box is going to be just around the layers. So that's how I like to do that. Click OK. And then here's the guy, and it brings it in, and it's not the right size. So let's go in and change this composition settings. Let's go into 1920 by 1080, and let's just do a 10-second comp. And so it's the right size now for video, but this guy, he's much too large in there, so I need to scale him down. And so there's a kind of a trick to do this. If I just go in here, select all of the layers, I go in and scale it down, you see that's not going to work. Everything's kind of scaling relative to where it's at, and he's being pulled apart. So the trick with this is to get a new null object, select everything and parent it to that null, and then scale the null. And then now we've got this guy scaled, and everything kind of works together. It's a smarter way of scaling multi-layered objects. So now let's go in and set this up so we can animate it. And what I'm using is the puppet tool. So I'm going to use a combination of puppet tool and parenting to go in and animate this guy. So let's do the puppet tool on all of these parts. So let's start with the legs, and then we'll go up. So the right leg, I'm going to grab the puppet tool. It's this pin right here, and I'm just going to pin right here by his hip, by his knee, by his foot. And then let's go to the left leg and do the same thing. Left arm, shoulder, elbow, wrist. Right arm, same thing. Okay, with the body, I want 3 points right down the middle. And for the head, I'm going to do 2 points, one at the chin, one at the nose. And this is just to kind of give a little bit of movement to the head. So now that I've got that all set up, it's time to go in and animate. And we're going to just take these one at a time, and then we'll do just kind of a walk cycle. And then once we get the look that we want, we can just copy and paste, and we can do some looping to make this so it works. So let's start with the right leg. So open up the effects in the timeline, go down to puppet tool into mesh, and there should be a deform, and in there's three points, and it's really buried deep in there, but that's just how it works. So it's this right leg, and so then what we're going to do is that's where it is at this point. So then let's go forward 5 frames, and maybe it's on its way back. So I'm just going to bring it back. Let's go 5 frames, and maybe he kicks up his leg. Then it's coming forward, and you just got to try to think about how a leg works. And it doesn't have to be too perfect because this is very kind of an abstract looking person. Okay, and at this point, I went 5 frames from the last time I animated. I'm going to take these first 3 keyframes, copy them, and then paste it so that it goes back to where it started. So that looks pretty silly how it is there, but when we're all done, it's going to look even sillier, but it's going to look like a cartoon. So at this point, at the end of the keyframe cycle, I'm going to deselect my layer so I'm not, selecting anything, and then I hit the asterisk on the 10 keypad of my keyboard. And this is going to put a little marker here, and I'm going to need this because I want all of the legs and arms and everything to move together and have the same kind of cycle. But I also want to be able to kind of see this in more than just one cycle through. So I'm going to copy this and then paste it right where it is. Go to the very end of the keyframe, paste it. Go to the ends of the keyframe and paste it. And we'll do 4 cycles here. Because sometimes you need to see something in the middle of the cycle in order to see how it animates. So I do 4 cycles, but this is where the cycle ends, is where that keyframe, where that marker is. So let's go to the next, which is the left leg. So at this point, see, the left leg is different because it's not going to start out right here. So I can move these keyframes, and that's why I needed more than just 1 cycle, because it's going to take more than 1 cycle to get this lined up just right. So when this leg is to the very back is when this leg needs to be the very front. So let's move these puppet tools to where my playhead is. And let's move this to the front. And when that's to the front, this is to the very back. And then what you need to do is just right here where this is the very back, we find that keyframe, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames from the beginning of the cycle. So we go to the beginning of the next cycle and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we can come in, copy these keyframes, stick them there. Now we need to make the knee move. So when he's bringing his leg up, we want this knee to be up like this. Okay, now I'm going to take this, copy it, paste it back on there. Now this is not at the right cycle. So the cycle is, we've got it at 1 second and 1 frame. So we'll go up to 2 seconds and 2 frames. That's the end of the cycle. What I need to do here now is I need to put keyframes on all of these. Go to the beginning of the cycle, put keyframes on all of these. And then what I can do is I'm going to delete these keyframes after the cycle and all these keyframes before the cycle. And so here is the cycle for the left leg. I'm going to copy that. Let's go to the beginning, paste that, and remember we're doing 4. Okay, so there's the leg. Next, let's do the body. I'm going to do the arms later. So in the body, again, there's 3 pins. And with this one, let's set how we want it to look at this point in the walk cycle, which maybe he's kind of leaning over to this side. And so let's kind of adjust that. Let's go and copy these keyframes. Go to this end of the cycle where that marker is. Paste that. And now let's do some animations in between. So right here, perhaps everything's different. It goes this way. Then right here, maybe it's like that. So now that we have kind of a movement, so let's take this, copy it, go to the last part of the cycle where that first, when those end keyframes are, paste, and then let's do that another 3 times. Okay, so there's with the body movement. Now we want to, let's sync up the arms and the head. So let's do the head next because that's going to be easier. And we're going to save the arms for last. So with the head, I'm going to do 2 things. First, I'm going to just keyframe the position and the scale. Well, not the scale, but the position and rotation. And let's get that to where we want it to be. About right there. And remember, it's going to be the same at the end of the cycle. So we go where that marker is, paste that. And then let's go right there to where it's starting to move back. And we just want to make the head follow along. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to copy that, paste that out. Okay, now I'm going to go into the mesh and deform, and I want him to be kind of bobbing his head a little bit. So let's go in, copy those keyframes, put them at the end of the cycle, and then in the middle we can come in and, you know, do some stuff like this. Let's take a look at that. Let's copy that, paste it throughout the 4 that I have here. Okay, next is the arms. So let's start with the left arm, and we're going to first just use the position and scale. Get that arm to where we like it. Maybe change the rotation a bit. Okay, next we're going to do arm, and let's start with the left arm. And before we do this, we need to put the anchor point right into the shoulder. And so you can see here, that's my anchor point. I'm going to hit Y on the keyboard, brings up my pan behind tool, and I'm going to just grab that and stick it right up there in the shoulder. Now what we can do is let's keyframe all of the transform. Let's get this to where we want it. About right there. So then let's copy all of these keyframes, stick it at the end of the cycle, and let's make it match in between. Okay, now that I like that movement, I'm going to just take this, copy it, and then paste it throughout. And that's just a basic movement. We're going to go back and use the puppet tool on these arms. I just want to get them hooked to the body first. So come back in on this right arm now, and we need to move the anchor point. So Y on the keyboard brings the pan behind tool, stick it right on the shoulder. And we can now come in and move this to where it needs to be. Let's change the rotation. Bring that up to the right point. And now let's keyframe all of those points. Go to the end of the cycle. Okay, I like that movement. So again, we're going to paste this out. Okay, let's take a look at where we're at. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my timeline, my composition length, and just do that so it'll loop. Now, I want to add some more movement to his arms, because right now they're just kind of hanging there. And that's why I have the puppet tool on them. Now, what I don't want is I don't want the arm movement to loop after this first cycle, this 1 second, 1 frame cycle. I should have just done 1 second. I don't know why I had an extra frame, but that's beside the point. So what I want to do is I want to have the loop go throughout these 4 seconds. And that's why I wanted to do more than just the 1 cycle. And I pasted everything through. So let's go into now the puppet tool. I'm on the right arm. Let's go into the mesh. Open those up. And let's copy those keyframes and then let's stick it at the very end so they're the same. And then everything in between, well, we can do lots of stuff with that now. And I'm not really kind of worrying about how it looks. Okay, so there's the arm on the right. I labeled it right arm even though it's his left arm, but it's the one on our right. Okay, now let's do the same thing to the other arm. Again, remember to copy these keyframes to the very end, and then let's do some wiggling of these puppet tools, these puppet pins. And the puppet pin tool is pretty cool. It gives a real organic kind of a look to it, the way it bends and warps things. So here's his final animation as far as the loop. Okay, here's the movement. Now, how do we make this so we can loop it and we can have him walking? So what I do for that is let's take all of this pre-compose, so Command-Shift-C on your keyboard or Control-Shift-C. Let's call this Baldy guy. Click OK. And we know that it ends right here, the end of the composition. So I actually want to come into this. I'm going to right-click up here in the work area and then trim comp to work area. So let's go back to, and we've got a 10-second comp, but then it ends after 4 seconds and 4 frames. So what we want to do is to loop this. So we can come to Layer, go to Time, enable Time Remapping, and what we're going to do is we're going to loop the time. Now there's a little bit of a trickiness to this because it automatically sets up some keyframes at the very beginning and at the very end of the time. But we don't want it to loop after this last one because it's blank. So we go to the end keyframe, click back one, create another keyframe there, and then let's delete that last keyframe. So what that's going to do is it's going to hold the last keyframe until we put this little expression on it. So to do expressions, hold down Option, click on the stopwatch, and this is the expression. Loop out, and then put some parentheses, open and close. And that's it. And what that's going to do is it's going to loop the exact same thing that happened for the previous set of keyframes. And also at this point, if I want to, if I feel like he's maybe walking a little slow, I can take this and bring it forward, and then now he's going to be walking a lot faster, and it's going to loop it more times. Do you see how it's rendering out these green bars? Because that's where it's looping. He's in a hurry now. So let's maybe have it walk over about 3 seconds. Okay, so now that we have this, let's make him walk across the screen. And the easiest way to do that is to just take this composition and then keyframe it across. So we want to start about here where we can see it. And let's start keyframing at this point. And how to kind of measure where you're at is make sure you have your rulers on. If you don't, it's Command or Control R to bring up your rulers. I'm going to bring one ruler, stick it right there where his foot is. And then let's go into the position, keyframe the position. Let's go forward to about right there, because that's where I know where the full stride is, and we're going to move him so his foot is back on that marker or that ruler point. And then what we do is then we take the ruler and stick it on the next foot. Move it to the end of the stroke, and we position him onto that ruler, and then let's move the ruler to that foot. And then we just keep on doing this to get him to walk across. Now at this point, I also want to go into my anchor point, and let's move him all the way off so he can walk onto the screen. And I might need to animate him a little bit further at the end, which I do. At this point where I can't see his feet, I just kind of guess on the pace. So there we have a quick animation of somebody walking. Let's take a look at that. It's got kind of a weird gimpy, limpy kind of walk going on, but that's just to add some character. So let's add a background to this. Layer new solid. Let's just do a white solid. Stick in the back. Let's maybe add a vignette over this. So easiest way to do a vignette is add a new adjustment layer. Go up here to the circle mask tool. Just double click that. Go in, hit invert down on the mask. Let's go to effect, color correction, exposure. Bring down the exposure. And then go back to the mask and feather the mask. Now let's give him a nice little shadow. So I'm going to duplicate this composition. Let's go ahead and hide the top one. And on this bottom one, let's go to Effect, Color Correction, Tint. Let's map black to black and black to white. Come in also to Effect, Blur and Fast Blur. Let's blur that. Make sure you have the repeat pixel edges on. And then also let's turn this 3D. Now we go into rotation. And we orient it negative 90 degrees on the x-axis. And then we got to go to the anchor point to move this, because remember, we have all of the position already moving. So let's move the anchor point to bring it down. But before we do that, let's bring this guy back up. Bring the anchor point down. And let's change the opacity, just to add a little bit of a shadow. Let's see what that looks like. So there you go. There's some character animation. Remember, the key things with this is not to rely on just one type of animation. So I didn't use just the puppet tool. I had these things separated out into different layers so I can easily kind of move them around and control them. If it was all just one drawing, then the puppet tool would have had a difficult time kind of moving these and animating them. But since I had them separate into the legs and the arms and the body and the head, it's easy to do that. Also, just take one part at a time. Like I did just the one leg, and then I did the other, and then I did the head and the arms and the body. You want to just take it all at one time. And then you do the ones that have the most effect on other layers first. So the legs are going to have the most effect because they're the ones that are driving the whole animation. After that, it's going to be the body, because as the body moves back and forth, that's going to move the arms and the head back and forth. So start with what's going to have the most effect on the rest of the animation first, and then you can apply the secondary animations to those other layers. So if you have any questions, just go ahead and put them down in the comments. I know this is kind of a lot of information here, and I'd love to answer or address any questions you have. This is Mikey Bort for PremiumBeat.com, and make sure you check out their blog. Check out their site. They've got some great music, some great stock music, and also on the blog, lots of other tutorials just like this. So, hope to see you next time, and thanks for watching.